Go back to India. The words slice through the studio like glass against stone. For a heartbeat, everything stalls, the clatter of cameras, the rustle of note cards, even the low murmur of the audience. Karoline Leavitt stands rigid behind her podium, a thin smile curling as if she's delivered the final blow. Across from her, Kash Patel blinks once, his expression unreadable. A collective gasp surges through the hall, followed by an uneasy hush. Viewers at home freeze mid-sip, scrolling thumbs pausing above glowing screens. The moderator stammers, caught between disbelief and duty. Producers wave frantically behind the glass wall, eyes darting to the red on-air light. Headlines seem to write themselves in real time. A young candidate hurling an ugly command in front of millions. The camera lingers on Kash, searching for cracks, anger, outrage, retreat, but finds only an unsettling calm. Commentators watching in green rooms whisper into phones. Social feeds explode, clips of the insult ricocheting across timelines before the debate has even moved on. Hashtags bloom, some gleeful, others horrified. Yet amid the noise, the man at the center remains steady, his hands resting lightly on the lectern, gaze fixed, as if measuring the weight of silence. Karoline shifts, perhaps expecting an instant rebuttal, maybe even a storm. None comes. The pause stretches, thick with tension, daring the next moment to define the night. It feels as though every eye in America is fixed on this single stage, waiting to see whether the slur will stand or be dismantled. The narrator's voice cuts through, low and deliberate. What no one in that room knew was that Kash Patel had been preparing for this kind of test his entire life. And the answer he was about to give, quiet, precise, unshakable, would turn an insult into a lesson and leave a nation breathless. The debate clock blinks, the moderator clears his throat, and the crowd leans forward as if drawn by a single invisible thread. Whatever comes next will decide more than the winner of an argument. It will reveal the measure of composure, pride, and belonging in the face of contempt. America has been simmering for years, its conversations about belonging and loyalty sharpening into blades. Immigration, heritage, patriotism, each is now a battlefield where rhetoric often wounds more than it heals. Talk shows thrive on outrage, headlines reward provocation, and social media rewards whoever can craft the cruelest soundbite. That night's debate was supposed to be a policy sparring match, another brisk hour of talking points and applause lines. Instead, Karoline's taunt detonated inside a country, already primed for division. For many watching, her words were not an isolated jab. They echoed a larger story they knew too well. First-generation families sitting in living rooms felt an old sting, a reminder of every sideways glance or playground insult. Professionals scrolling on tablets after work heard in her voice the same question they fielded at airports, offices, and neighborhood gatherings. Where are you really from? The stakes rose far beyond two people on stage. The insult reverberated through millions of private histories, asking whether America truly belonged to all who believed in it. Commentators scrambled to interpret what had just happened. Some tried to brush it aside as campaign rough and tumble. Others recognized that something deeper had cracked open, an unspoken line crossed in front of a national audience. Even viewers who rarely agreed on politics sensed a boundary being tested, a challenge to the notion that respect for one another is non-negotiable in a democracy. It wasn't just about Kash Patel. It was about whether heritage could be turned into a weapon and still leave civic decency intact. Kash remained silent, and that silence began to acquire gravity. It wasn't retreat, it was an act of measure, a refusal to let the moment become a circus. With each passing second, curiosity thickened. Was he collecting himself for fury, or was he crafting something more deliberate? People at home leaned toward their screens, holding their breath without realizing it. The insult had been shocking. What might come next could be historic. Producers whispered frantically through headsets, warning that the clip was already trending across platforms. Hashtags formed in real time, some mocking, others rallying around Kash, many demanding accountability from Karoline. The debate had stopped being a local skirmish and was now a mirror reflecting the country's deeper anxieties about identity, belonging, and basic respect. In that fragile space, the audience sensed possibility as much as peril. A single sentence from Kash could cement the evening as yet another cynical spectacle, or it could shift the national conversation, offering proof that dignity still has a place in public life. What happened next, everyone realized, might flip the script on political bullying and remind Americans why composure and pride can be more powerful than any insult. Karoline Leavitt's public story begins with the poise of a prodigy. Fresh out of college, she walked into Washington armed with crisp talking points and an unshakable smile. As a communications aide, she mastered the mechanics of the message, how to sharpen a phrase until it gleamed, how to plant it where cameras couldn't resist. She was quick, efficient, and loyal to the party's brawniest voices. Senior staffers noticed her fearlessness. She never flinched when asked to defend the indefensible, instead spinning it into something resembling valor. That talent vaulted her into punditry, where boldness was currency. On panels and podcasts, she learned that outrage produced the highest return. She delivered zingers with the precision of someone who had rehearsed each line before a mirror, each syllable polished to provoke. Clips of her verbal jousts spread across partisan feeds, celebrated by audiences hungry for someone willing to say what others wouldn't. Karoline seemed to thrive in the role, equal parts strategist and street fighter, gleefully dismantling opponents while basking in applause from viewers who prized defiance over civility. But beneath the sheen of confidence lay an ambition that demanded escalation. She cultivated a brand of audacity, often leaning on sarcasm or personal jabs to keep her name in circulation. Old colleagues recall how she weighed every statement not only for its truth, but for its potential to spark trending debates. A slight roll of her eyes during a briefing, a sly remark about an adversary's background. Each was a calculated risk designed to keep her one step ahead in the spectacle economy. As election season approached, Karoline sought to convert notoriety into office. Her speeches framed her as a champion of straight talk, an antidote to what she called hypersensitivity in politics. Yet threaded through her appeals were subtle notes that unsettled some listeners. A readiness to question the Americanness of critics, a fondness for phrases that drew invisible lines between who belonged and who merely resided. Supporters called it fearlessness. Detractors saw a willingness to inflame resentment if it served her rise. The debate stage offered her an irresistible stage. She came prepared not just with policy counters but with arrows tipped in provocation, convinced that dominance mattered more than dialogue. Advisors had hinted that Kash Patel, with his measured reputation and immigrant roots, might expose the limits of her aggression if she wasn't careful. Karoline brushed it off. She had weathered storms before and believed composure was less memorable than spectacle. Her history was full of moments that rewarded exactly that instinct. Years earlier, a televised spat with a veteran reporter had boosted her profile after she dismissed his criticism as elitist whining. Another time, she mocked a rival's bilingual campaign ad, earning laughs from a partisan crowd. Each incident taught her that attention, not accuracy, was the coin of relevance. The calculus was simple: provoke, trend, repeat. Yet this strategy carried a quiet cost. Audiences who once thrilled at her sharpness began to sense a brittleness behind the banter. Some allies worried she was mistaking virality for persuasion, trading the slow work of building coalitions for the sugar rush of outrage. Still, Karoline pressed ahead, convinced she could control every fire she lit. That conviction shaped the moment she faced Kash across the debate floor. She saw a chance to puncture his calm with a quip that would unsettle him and electrify her base. The phrase perched on her tongue before the question had even finished. "Go back to India," she said, with the practiced ease of someone certain that any backlash would be brief and any headline useful. But as the room froze, Karoline's past tactics began to loom like shadows stretching behind her podium, hinting that this time, The game she had perfected might finally turn against its player. Kash Patel's story begins long before he stepped under the harsh lights of that debate stage. It starts in a modest New Jersey apartment where his parents, new to America from Gujarat, worked double shifts so their children could build lives unbound by the limits they had known. His mother stitched garments at a local shop, fingers raw from fabric, while his father drove a delivery truck through winters that seemed to test his resolve. Around their small kitchen table, they spoke in a mix of Gujarati and English, repeating a single promise. In this country, effort and honor could outlast prejudice. As a boy, Kash carried that promise like a talisman. He learned early that belonging wasn't always offered freely. Teachers mispronounced his name, classmates mocked his lunches, but he also found unexpected allies, neighbors who explained baseball rules, librarians who guided him through shelves of American history. He grew fascinated with the Constitution, its guarantees of equality and due process forming a quiet counterweight to every slight. The parchment words seemed to say, "This country is yours too if you dare claim it." In college, Kash gravitated toward law, drawn by the notion that justice was a craft one could master. Late nights in the library, he pored over landmark opinions, tracing how arguments built bridges between lofty ideals and real lives. Professors noted his steadiness. He debated fiercely, but without malice, grounding every point in precedent. That composure earned him internships in federal courts, where he watched judges weigh evidence with solemn precision. For Kash, law wasn't just a career path. It was proof that order and fairness could tame chaos. After law school, he chose public service over private profit, joining national security teams that demanded discretion and moral clarity. In windowless rooms, he analyzed threats, briefed policymakers, and defended civil liberties even as he helped safeguard the country from attack. The work was grueling, long hours, high stakes, relentless scrutiny, but it sharpened his discipline. Colleagues remember him as the calm in the storm, someone who could translate dense intelligence into clear strategy without losing sight of human cost. Through it all, Kash kept close the lessons of his upbringing. He understood that the American experiment thrived only when citizens held themselves accountable to its principles. He visited schools to speak with immigrant students, urging them to see their heritage as strength, not burden. He volunteered at community legal clinics, guiding newcomers through paperwork that meant the difference between belonging and exile. Every act reflected a belief seated in childhood. Identity and patriotism need not compete. They can reinforce each other. That inner steadiness became most visible during moments of pressure. When political tempests threatened to erode public trust, Kash refused to bend toward spectacle. He answered criticism with facts, countered insinuations with patience. Friends teased that he possessed an almost unnerving composure, as if he carried a private anchor others couldn't see. In truth, the anchor was hard-won. Years of watching his parents stand tall against dismissive landlords, of earning respect through excellence rather than argument. By the time he accepted an invitation to debate Karoline Leavitt, Kash understood the stakes went beyond party lines. The stage was another proving ground, a chance to defend the values that had shaped his journey. The idea that America's strength lies in its ability to honor all who serve it, regardless of origin. As he adjusted the microphone and scanned the audience that night, he carried not only policy notes but the quiet force of generations who had risked everything for a place in this democracy. When Karoline's words cut across the room, they struck against more than personal pride. They challenged the covenant his parents had trusted, the one he had spent a lifetime upholding through law and service. Yet even as shock rippled through the hall, Kash felt the familiar weight of that anchor settle. He remembered every barrier crossed, every oath sworn, every moment he'd chosen steadiness over fury. And from that reservoir of calm, he prepared to answer, not just for himself, but for the promise that had brought his family to these shores and kept him faithful to the country they all believed could live up to its highest ideals. The air in the studio thickened as the moderator struggled to regain footing, his voice quivering against the static of disbelief. Karoline seized the pause like a seasoned performer spotting her mark. She leaned forward, chin lifted, the corners of her mouth sharpening into a challenge. "I'm just saying what people are thinking," she declared, drawing out each syllable as if daring the room to scold her. "We can't keep pretending that every critic is a saint just because they wave the immigrant card." Murmurs rippled across the audience, some nodding, others recoiling. Kash didn't flinch. His gaze held steady, neither retreating nor attacking, as though he were weighing every word she had just hurled into the open. The cameras caught the contrast, her pulse visible in the quick rise of her collarbone, his calm etched into the set of his jaw. Viewers at home saw it too, the split screen telling its own story. Karoline pressed on, sensing that hesitation would look like weakness. "We need people in leadership who aren't afraid to defend real American values," she said, fingers drumming the lectern. "I refuse to apologize for demanding loyalty to the country that gave us everything." Her voice rose an octave, sharp enough to slice through the low buzz of the crowd. A few claps came from the back, tentative but defiant. Others folded their arms, discomfort plain on their faces. The room had divided itself into islands, some cheering, some whispering, many holding their breath. The moderator cleared his throat again, trying to interject, but Karoline's words raced ahead. "This is not about race," she added quickly. "It's about whether people stand with America or against it." Her tone carried the rehearsed cadence of someone accustomed to turning controversy into applause lines. Yet the applause didn't come. The silence that followed was jagged, heavy with anticipation. Somewhere in the third row, a young woman shifted uncomfortably, her eyes fixed on Kash. He remained motionless, hands resting lightly on the edge of the podium. Narration drifted over the moment, quiet and deliberate. Every debate has a turning point, a breath when time slows and a single sentence can redraw the night. Few expected what he was about to say. Karoline's smile faltered, just enough for the cameras to catch. She seemed to realize that the stillness gathering around Kash was not weakness but something sturdier, more deliberate. The crowd sensed it too. Whispers softened into hush, as if everyone understood they were standing at the edge of a response that could change everything. Kash let the silence breathe for a heartbeat longer, steady as granite beneath the stage lights. When he finally spoke, his voice was low but carried through the studio like a clean line of music cutting through static. "Karoline," he began, "my parents came to this country with nothing but hope, faith, and a willingness to work harder than anyone else in the room. They didn't ask for special treatment. They asked for the chance to earn their place, and they built it brick by brick. That's the America I was raised to believe in." A hush settled over the audience. Even the cameras seemed to hold still, their lenses catching the flicker of nerves across Karoline's face. Kash drew a breath, eyes sweeping the room. "I stand on this stage because of them, because this nation's promise is bigger than any insult or small-minded taunt. My father drove delivery trucks through snowstorms so I could stay in school and learn the law of this land. My mother stitched clothes late into the night so that her children could grow up knowing that liberty wasn't a gift handed down. It was a responsibility to carry forward." He straightened, calm turning to quiet steel. "And I chose to serve this country, not as a slogan but as a duty. I worked in national security because I wanted to defend every family's right to safety and dignity, no matter where their grandparents were born. I have sworn oaths to uphold the Constitution you and I both cherish. That document does not measure devotion by the origin of your name, or the color of your skin, or the spices in your kitchen. It measures it by your willingness to stand for its principles." Applause broke out, tentative at first, then gathering force. Kash allowed it to settle before continuing. "When you tell someone like me to go back, you are not defending American values, you are shrinking them. You are suggesting that patriotism has a zip code, that love for this country comes with an expiration date if your story begins somewhere else. But that isn't the America my parents believed in, and it isn't the one I've risked my career to protect. Karoline shifted, fingers tightening on her notes. Her practiced confidence faltered as the room leaned toward Kash, drawn by the calm conviction in his tone. He pressed on, weaving personal memory with national creed. I've sat in rooms where we weighed threats to the homeland, and I've seen how fragile freedom can be if we don't defend it together. The enemy has never asked whether the soldier guarding the gate was born in Ohio or overseas. They only care that someone stands watch. That unity, our willingness to lift each other despite our differences, is what keeps us whole. Another wave of applause swept across the audience, louder now, punctuated by cheers. Kash nodded slightly, not milking the moment but letting it speak for itself. "I won't answer hatred with hatred," he said evenly. "Because that's not strength, it's surrender. Real strength is looking at someone who wants to reduce you to a stereotype and saying, 'You don't get to define me, and you don't get to define the country we both call home.'" His words gathered momentum, carrying a rhythm that felt both intimate and unshakable. America's greatness has never depended on erasing where we came from. It depends on what we build together. My heritage is not an asterisk on my patriotism. It is proof of it. It's proof that this country is still a living experiment, still capable of welcoming people who arrive with nothing but resolve and turning that resolve into service. Karoline's gaze dropped for a fraction of a second, caught by the gravity in his voice. The cameras caught the flicker, a crack in the polished veneer. Kash didn't gloat. He simply allowed the audience to see the choice before them. A narrow vision that weaponized origin stories, or a larger one that honored every citizen's stake in the Republic. He closed with measured clarity, voice softening, but losing none of its resonance. "I'm not leaving, Karoline. I'm not going anywhere because this is my home every bit as much as it is yours. And I'll spend every ounce of energy I have making sure that the next kid whose parents arrive with a suitcase and a dream doesn't have to hear someone question his right to stand here, to serve, to love this country out loud." The applause that followed was no longer hesitant. It surged, echoing off the walls, rising into a standing ovation. Some audience members wiped at their eyes, while others clapped until their palms reddened. Kash remained still, letting the ovation belong to something larger than himself. The resilience of families like his, the unbroken thread of civic faith. As the noise swelled, Karoline tried to muster a retort, but the momentum had shifted irreversibly. The crowd's energy wrapped itself around Kash's steady posture, a visible testament to the power of composure over contempt. He glanced toward the moderator, then back at the audience, offering a faint, steady smile. And just as the applause began to crest, the narrator's voice cut through, rich with anticipation. What began as an insult had become a declaration, a reminder of the country's best self, and yet the night's shockwaves were only beginning. By dawn, the exchange had escaped the studio and detonated across every corner of the internet. Clips of Kash's poised rebuttal were trimmed, captioned, and shared in a torrent that made hashtags pulse like a heartbeat. Respect Kash, proud to belong, go back no more. On timelines crowded with cynicism, people found themselves replaying his words just to feel the quiet steadiness again. Immigrant families filmed reactions, mothers translating his lines to children who watched wide-eyed, hearing affirmation in a language beyond accents. Cable panels scrambled to keep pace. A conservative anchor admitted, almost grudgingly, that it's hard to argue with the dignity he showed. Progressive commentators leaned in, calling Kash's moment a masterclass in reclaiming patriotism. Screens flashed graphs of skyrocketing engagement as pundits parsed every syllable, debating whether this was the dawn of a new civility or just another viral flare destined to fade. Late-night hosts stitched the clip into their monologues. One opened with a slow-motion replay of Karoline's expression as Kash delivered the line about liberty having no zip code, punctuating it with mock confetti. Another, usually allergic to earnestness, set the joke aside long enough to marvel at a politician refusing to trade insult for insult. The studio audience roared, sensing they were witnessing something more durable than a meme. Across comment sections, the conversation deepened. Veterans spoke about standing watch beside soldiers from every continent. Teachers posted about students who felt suddenly visible. Even some of Karoline's own supporters wondered aloud whether her jab had crossed a line too raw to defend. The usual trenches of partisanship blurred as strangers agreed on at least one thing: respect had been earned in real time, on live television. Karoline's camp issued a statement by mid-morning, polished but tense, framing her remark as misinterpreted humor. It landed with a thud. Reporters replayed the unedited footage, the weight of her words unmistakable. In contrast, Kash's remarks were clipped for podcasts, quoted in newsletters, and folded into think pieces about the moral temperature of public discourse. Editorials praised not just the content of his speech, but its discipline, the refusal to let provocation steal the narrative. Meanwhile, community halls and coffee shops hummed with a softer discussion: what it means to claim belonging in a country still learning to keep its promise. For many, Kash had given language to a quiet pride that rarely made headlines. For others, the scene exposed the risk of letting derision become a reflex in political debate. The argument over rhetoric, respect, and the reach of patriotism grew richer with every repost. Even global outlets picked it up, threading Kash's voice into stories about migration and national identity. Headlines framed him as proof that composure can outshine outrage, that a calm defense of shared ideals might still bend the cultural current. In an age trained to reward the loudest blow, here was a reminder that steadiness could reverberate louder. As evening settled, the clip reached a final crescendo on talk shows, where guests dissected its strategic brilliance and its moral undertone. Some wondered aloud if this was the moment Kash stepped from advisor to emblem, a figure capable of knitting policy, heritage, and principle into a single narrative. Others warned that the next news cycle might swallow even this surge of goodwill, but their caution was drowned by applause from studio audiences who had watched the viral clip live on air. Kash himself stayed off camera, releasing only a brief message thanking viewers for seeing the bigger picture. That restraint fed the storyline, amplifying the sense that his answer had not been a stunt, but an instinct drawn from something older and steadier than partisanship. Yet beneath the celebration, currents of tension stirred. Karoline's allies hinted at retaliation in the next debate. Anonymous blogs speculated about opposition research already in motion. Admirers urged Kash to keep speaking, to use the momentum for a broader call to civic grace. Supporters sensed that this was more than a single victory. It was an opening, and openings invite both possibility and peril. As notifications continued to spike, a question flickered across screens and whispers alike. Had the tide truly shifted, or was this calm before a sharper storm? The studio lights had cooled, but the echo of that debate lingered like a steady drumbeat across the nation. In living rooms, classrooms, and bustling cafes, people weren't just replaying a viral clash. They were measuring themselves against its quiet lesson. Kash's words, rooted in heritage yet bound to the Constitution, had offered something rare in politics, an invitation to rise rather than recoil. He hadn't dodged the insult or answered it in kind. He'd redirected its force toward a vision of belonging too sturdy to fracture. Commentators noted how his answer rewrote the script for patriotism. It wasn't a contest of who could wave the flag hardest, but of who could widen its meaning. By affirming his roots while claiming equal stake in America's promise, he reminded viewers that dignity is not passive. It is an act of courage. Civility, often dismissed as weakness, revealed itself as a sharpened edge, one able to cut through noise without drawing blood. Karoline's outburst now seemed smaller, almost brittle when held against the calm authority that followed it. Her sneer had been meant to shrink a rival. Instead, it illuminated the emptiness of reflexive scorn. Kash's composure reframed the moment as proof that respect is not something to beg for but to embody. In that sense, he hadn't merely defended himself. He defended the civic fabric, stitching a tear with steady hands. Across the country, teachers used the clip to spark conversations about empathy and public speech. Parents showed it to children as an example of how to meet provocation without surrendering self-respect. Even skeptics, reluctant to praise anyone in Washington, admitted there was a discipline worth emulating. The scene became shorthand for a possibility too often discounted, that reasoned pride can outperform rage. Yet the moral stretched beyond politics. It asked everyone watching to consider how they might handle their own smaller confrontations. The sly remark at work, the barbed joke at school, the casual dismissal of a neighbor's worth. Kash's example urged a refusal to let other people's contempt dictate our posture. To stand firm, without cruelty, is to protect not only personal honor but the common space where dialogue survives. Some commentators warned that composure alone cannot heal division. Structural work remains. But even they conceded that without a cultural appetite for steadiness, reform falters. The debate had shown that character, expressed in the heat of challenge, can ripple outward, shaping what communities deem possible. It reminded audiences that patriotism, at its best, is not possession but stewardship, care for an ideal larger than any one quarrel. As the week ended, Kash returned to his routine, declining offers to capitalize on the moment with merchandise or fiery follow-ups. That restraint completed the story, underscoring that his answer had been no tactic, only conviction. The moral he left behind was simple but resonant. Real strength is measured not by how loudly we retaliate, but by how firmly we stand for the values we claim. And so the memory of that night settled into public lore, less about a gaffe or a clapback than about the clarity possible when insult meets integrity. In a culture braced for the next outrage, Kash had modeled something older, steadier, and quietly radical: composure as defiance, respect as resolve. It was a reminder to every viewer that citizenship is a daily practice, renewed whenever someone chooses dignity over derision, and that in such choices, the Republic renews itself too. One sentence rewrote the debate. It wasn't a polished slogan or a rehearsed zinger. It was a measured truth, spoken with steadiness when the room tilted toward chaos. Kash's calm reply didn't just answer an insult. It offered a glimpse of how democracy can sound when we choose respect over spectacle. That moment lingers because it tells us something hopeful. Civility still carries power, even in the loudest arenas. If you felt the charge of that exchange, if it reminded you why decency is worth defending, take that feeling beyond the screen. Share the clip, talk about it with friends, bring it to spaces where division feels inevitable. Each conversation that prizes composure over contempt chips away at the culture of shouting matches. It affirms that identity and patriotism can stand side by side, that empathy belongs in public life. We'll keep uncovering stories where dignity wins, where voices rise above cynicism to show a better way forward. If you want to see more moments like this, subscribe, stay connected, and help build an audience that rewards clarity instead of cruelty. Your support lets these narratives travel farther, reminding people that the fight for respect is never just a headline. It's the heartbeat of a shared future. So as you leave this video, hold onto what Kash modeled: the strength to meet hostility without surrendering your own poise. The next time you face a crossroads between reaction and resolve, remember how one sentence shifted an entire debate, and how your own words might do the same.